Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing a video about the pistol that you see in front of you. Now this is something you've probably seen if you've been around the 1911 world on the internet for some time, and that is the Tisas Raider. Now if it looks familiar while not being familiar with that name, that's because it is basically a loose clone of the Colt M45A1, which was used by the United States Marine Corps for a very brief period of time. But unlike the Colt, this comes in at a much more reasonable price point while still performing fairly well, as you will see. So before we get too deep into the specifics, I want to just give you a brief overview of what this pistol is, how it comes out of the box, and then we'll dig into kind of what my experience has been with it so far and whether or not I would recommend it for you as the viewer. So again, at its basic core, this is a 45 ACP 1911. It's a full-size barrel, full-size grip, so definitely not something designed for concealed carry. This is a full-size duty 1911. Single stack, so you're typically going to be running your 7 or 8 round magazines. Obviously you can get extended ones. This is one of the 8 round KCI mags. We'll touch more on the KCI mags later on. This one is railed, so as you can see, I had a Surefire X300 on it originally because I mean, it just looks right, but obviously doesn't come with anything on it out of the box. Up front, we'll just kind of go front to back here. We have a standard 1911 style bushing, so this is going to disassemble in a very typical way, again, if you're used to the full-size duty 1911s. We do have some pretty nice sights. It's a 3-dot setup. They're not tritium, but for the price point, you know, can't really expect that, but they are dovetailed in, so if you wanted to replace it with something like that, you absolutely could. If this was something I was actually going to use as a duty pistol, it's definitely something that I would recommend. Now, moving back from there, we have a ambidextrous safety. So we've got this large style but like paddle style safety on either side. So whether you're a lefty or a righty, that's something that is very easily manipulated. So that is a good thing, again, in my opinion, for a duty pistol. If we're talking concealed carry, that's another story, but that works out very nicely. The grips on here are a very aggressive, at least straight out of the box. I believe it's a G10. If that's incorrect, I'll put it on the screen. But I believe it's a G10, at least it feels like G10. When I first got this, it was actually a little uncomfortable to shoot, especially in 45, just because of the extra grit on those grips. However, they have smoothed out over time to where this thing is very, very easily shootable. Obviously, I'm wearing gloves right now. It's because it's really cold out, but when I'm shooting this thing just barehanded, it shoots just fine. Hammer is a skeletonized hammer, so if I drop that forward, again, you can see daylight through that hammer, and it does have some nice texturing on the top, so if you needed to thumb it back for whatever reason, you can. To me, that doesn't really matter because I'm not going to be doing a second strike on something like this. I'm just going to get that round out, run the slide, and obviously I'm not going to be decocking this because that's not how you carry a 1911. One thing that I like on the grip safety is it does have the enlarged little bump out at the bottom just to increase the likelihood of getting full pressure on that grip safety. I have not run into a situation so far with this pistol where I have had a failure due to it not being fully depressed. So that is a good thing. Got that straight mainspring housing down there at the bottom, so it's going to be very familiar to what a lot of you guys are used to. And on the back of that mainspring housing, we do have just vertical serrations for that extra grip, no horizontal ones. I always like the 2-axis when I can get it. And then on that note, on the front of the grip, there is no serrations at all. You know, do with that information what you will. Again, for a pistol at this price point, it's kind of to be expected, but you know, would have been nice. Now, the magazines that this thing comes with, if I remember correctly, are ASC magazines. The magazines that I've been predominantly using are the KCI magazines. If you've been around 1911s, you know that 1911s are typically a little bit more finicky when it comes to magazines and reliability. So at least with FMJs, the KCI mags have been very, very reliable. I have had some malfunctions with this gun. However, it's hard, as always with something like this, to identify what the actual cause or the root cause of that malfunction is. Is it ammo? Is it just the geometry internally? Is it the magazine? Overwhelmingly though, the KCI magazines have been reliable. However, with certain types of hollow points, the ASCs work better, but again, if you're shooting FMJ or an FMJ shaped hollow point, at least with that conical shape, you should be fine, but obviously your mileage may vary just by the nature of magazines. Nice thing with the KCI mags is they're reasonably priced, so it's easy to load up on them. So I've got several of those things. Now, one of the things I should also say is this thing has held up to some pretty aggressive use. So obviously you should never do this, but I was using a holster that was not designed for this gun. Originally, I was actually using it in a, of all things, the SIG P320 holster, and it fell out. And thankfully, between having the manual safety on and the grip safety, when this thing hit the ground, it did not fire, but it did chew up the top of the gun quite a bit. You know, if you've been to a lot of gun ranges like this one, it's gravel, so if it hits on gravel, it's going to chew it up. So the finish did reasonably well under those circumstances. However, one of the things you will also notice, at least on the rear sight here, and I'll maybe have to roll in a picture because it'll be hard to show in this context, or at least from this angle, I am starting to get a little bit of corrosion, but again, that's in areas where that surface finish has been worn off. So again, do with that information what you will, just a little bit of oil. It's all just surface stuff. It'll wipe off no problem. And again, if I'm going to be using this thing for any serious purpose, I'd probably swap it out to tritium sights. Anyway, again, do with that information what you will. All right, so we're gonna just do another accuracy test. I've done a lot of shooting with this pistol and I know it to be a very accurate one. I've just got some cheap 230 grain FMJ ammo. We are at 5 yards right now. I'm just gonna see how tight we can get these into the center A of the A box. All right, let's go look at that together. I mean, again, 5 yards, taking my time, but standing offhand, that's not too shabby at all. This gun's more accurate than I am as a pistol shooter, at least. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what my experience has actually been kind of in totality with this pistol. So at this point in time, I've been running this thing for, I actually have the date somewhere. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'll put it on the screen about when I got this gun. I'm at about 1,000 rounds through this thing. And again, overwhelmingly, this thing has been reliable. However, I have had some issues. Now, some of those issues have been malfunctions while shooting it. Some of those issues have just been kind of build quality issues. So one of the first things that happened the first time I took this thing out, grip panel started coming loose. Now, say what you will about, yeah, it's a budget gun, yada, 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 but in my opinion, if it's a gun that I'm purchasing, whether it's a range toy or something I'm going to be trusting my life to, things shouldn't be coming loose when all you're doing is shooting it, which is what this thing is designed to do. This gun is designed to be fired. And if the only thing I have to do to start getting things to start coming off is shoot it, that's not great. Now, a little bit of Loctite on those the little inserts and then on the screws themselves, that has fixed that problem, but I still would have rather it not been an issue to begin with. Now, outside of that, I have had several malfunctions of this thing not wanting to feed when running that first round into the chamber. Again, it's hard to identify what the root cause of that is. Is it because I'm not getting a proper stroke? Is it because I'm not getting a proper stroke on the slide? Possibly. Is it magazines? Possibly. Again, it's hard to know, but it's also just kind of hashtag 1911 things. 1911s, I know some people out there love to say that they are the most reliable gun ever devised. I agree that John Moses Browning was a genius, but they can be a lot more finicky just as a platform from the get-go. And when I ran this thing through a pistol class, because I always like when I can, if I'm doing a review of a gun, to actually run it through a class, because somehow you just identify issues that don't arise when you're just shooting at the range. And when I ran this thing through a pistol class, very, very regularly, that first round out of the magazine, running this thing from a locked open slide, it would fail to feed. Again, could be user error, but just something that I've noticed. Again, do with that what you will. But outside of that, well, and actually, sorry, and there have been a couple instances with hollow points, specifically some of the Hornady critical defense, where with certain magazines, it just consistently hangs up. Some magazines, it's fine. And that's why it goes back to that kind of core quality of, if you're gonna be trusting your gun, your life to a gun, make sure you run it in the configuration that you're gonna be running it for defense. So if there's a certain type of ammo that you wanna use for defense, especially with 1911s, you need to A, make sure that ammo runs, and B, that the magazines you're using it in are gonna run it. So definitely some due diligence required on that part. However, all of that being said, I've really, really enjoyed this gun. Again, I think there's just something about a full-size 1911, especially a railed one with a matching light, that just looks good. I mean, the X300 looks like it was made for 1911, where it kind of comes to that same kind of pinnacle point. It just looks good, and this thing has been a ton of fun to shoot. I've used this thing a lot. As I said, I'm over 1,000 rounds through this thing now. I've used it in a bunch of the Training Tuesday videos. I've run it through a class. I just use it at the range quite a bit, and it's just a really, really nice gun. Now, is this something that I would recommend for concealed carry? Absolutely not. Is it even something I would recommend for duty carry? No, I just think there's better options for the same size and weight, especially, because these are not light guns. But as someone who is a firearms enjoyer, and especially someone who enjoys the aesthetic of American military arms, as again, this is a clone of, albeit made in Turkey, it's just, a 1911 is, especially one in 45, is something I feel like I need to have in my collection. And spending the money on something like this is a really efficient way of getting to that point, while still holding a very, very reasonable level of quality. Again, as far as what my expectations would be of a 1911 in general, as far as reliability goes, being less than, say, my Glock 19, my SIG 365X macro, etc., etc. Obviously, it's not going to be as reliable as those, but it's still a really good gun, and one that I am very, very happy with. And I did spend my own money on this. I bought this from the gun store where I used to work. And again, I, with the help of my patrons, paid for all of the ammo to put through this thing. So now I will say KCI did send me a handful of magazines for this. I did also purchase one or two independently, just so I could have, well, I purchased those before I reached out to them to send more magazines, because they asked what magazines I needed. But it's just been running really, really well with those magazines. I have seen, and I've even considered, like, getting this thing cut for an optic. I think that's a little bit beyond what my expectations for a gun like this would be. Does it look cool? Yeah. But if I was going to do that, I'd rather get one more purpose-built for that, instead of having to adapt this thing to that. Again, your mileage may vary. Do what you want. Be happy. This is America. But overall, I've been really, really happy. Now, one thing I learned in the process of this is it's actually really hard to find a holster that will accommodate a full-size 1911 with an X300. So I actually had to go the custom route. There's a guy here locally in Oregon that reached out to me, asked what I needed a holster for. I told him a full-size 1911 with an X300, and he made one. Let me go grab it. So he was able to make this. I told him I might throw an optic on there, so he had it cut far enough forward that if I wanted to run an optic, I still could. But this thing accommodates it with the X300. I'm also able to use the QLS system, so I can run it with my other Safariland holster setups. And it's just been really, really great for me. I have not had the same issue of the gun falling out like it did in a holster that it wasn't made for. But so this has just been a really good solution for me. I run around the range a lot when I'm out here, and this has been super solid. Obviously, with this style of taco design, you can obviously set the retention yourself, so you can mitigate those issues. If you want it to be easier to pull out and more likely to fall out, you could, but as I have it set, it's been running really, really nice. So if you're considering getting a holster for something that's a little bit tricky to find a holster for, definitely reach out to this guy. But if you're just looking for a reasonable quality 1911 that's not going to cost an arm and a leg, I think Tisas is really killing it. I've seen a lot of really cool guns that they've been coming out with that are pretty close facsimiles to a lot more expensive 1911s out there. And from a lot of the reviews that I've seen, they're just really doing a super solid job. Again, especially when you consider the price that these things are coming in at. I watched a lot of reviews of this before I got it. I watched a lot of reviews of this after I got it. And again, it's just hard to be mad about it. And if you're a tinkerer, as most 1911 guys are, there's plenty of room for expansion here. You can change out your trigger, your grips, and everything else. Or just keep it like it comes out of the box, throw a light on it, throw it in a holster, and you can have a ton of fun out here at the range. So, pretty much all there is to it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, definitely throw those in the comment section down below. I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. I haven't been terribly active here on YouTube, and I am trying to fix that. I've just had a lot going on with my professional and personal life just to try to stay above water. But I am trying to make more of an effort to be out here. As I alluded to earlier, I want to give thanks to my patrons, because without them, I would not have been able to get this thing to the round count that it is currently at. That is a direct result of the contributions I get over there. So if you'd like to support the channel, definitely follow the links down in the description below. We do a monthly live stream. I do behind the scenes pictures. We do some exclusive content every now and then. So if any of that stuff sounds interesting, again, or you just want to financially support the channel, follow the links down in the description below. With all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.